My husband forced me to get a second job, so I let him handle the household alone. The envelope from Westlake Art Institute felt impossibly light for something that carried the weight of my dreams. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and read the words I'd been hoping for. Dear Sarah Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted. A sob of joy escaped my lips. After 15 years of sketching during stolen moments, lunch breaks at the dental office where I worked part-time, late nights after the kids were asleep, someone had finally seen value in my art. The program was designed for working parents, with classes that fit perfectly around my schedule. I'd calculated the costs down to the penny, planning to use the small inheritance from my grandmother I'd been saving for something truly important. This was it. This was my something important. I prepared Mark's favorite dinner that evening, herb-crusted salmon with roasted potatoes, and set the table with our wedding china. Tonight was a celebration. Mark arrived home at his usual time, loosening his tie with an exhausted sigh as he entered the kitchen. Something smells good, he said, peering over my shoulder at the stove. What's the occasion? I turned, unable to contain my smile. I got some news today. I handed him the acceptance letter. Remember that art program I applied to? I got in. His expression shifted, the slight smile vanishing. That art school? The expensive one. It's not that expensive, I said quickly. My savings will cover most of it. And your savings? Mark's eyebrows shot up. You mean our emergency fund?
Sarah, we talked about this.
That's for actual emergencies, not. He gestured vaguely at the letter. Hobbies. The word landed like a slap. Hobby. As if the thing that had kept me sane through pregnancies, miscarriages, and the mind-numbing routine of motherhood was equivalent to collecting bottle caps. It's not a hobby, I replied, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. It's something I've wanted to pursue seriously for years. You know that. Mark sighed heavily. Look, I get that you enjoy painting, but we've got real priorities. Jake needs braces next year, Emma's soccer fees just doubled, and have you seen our property tax bill? I've calculated everything, I insisted as we sat at the carefully set table. It won't impact our family budget. I'll use my personal savings. There's no such thing as personal savings when you're married with kids, Mark interrupted with the patient but firm voice he used when explaining something obvious. Our money goes to what the family needs, and what I need doesn't count. I asked, feeling something inside me harden. Of course it counts. But is an expensive art program really what you need? Or just something you want? The distinction stung. Want versus need, our perpetual argument, but somehow my wants always ranked lowest. Mark's golf club membership was a networking necessity. The kids' endless activities were investing in their future. But my art? Just a frivolous desire. I thought you'd be happy for me, I said quietly, staring down at my untouched food. I would be if it made financial sense. Mark took a long sip of his beer. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about our finances. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. With inflation and the kids' expenses increasing, we're stretched thin, he continued. I was thinking it might be time for you to consider something more than part-time work. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You want me to work full-time at the dental office? Mark shook his head. They can't offer you full-time hours. I was thinking you could keep that job and add something else. Maybe evening shifts somewhere. The Wilson's daughter makes great tips at that new restaurant downtown. The breath left my lungs in a rush. You want me to wait tables? At night? When would I see the kids? When would I have time for? That's the point, Sarah. Mark interrupted gently but firmly. We don't have the luxury of me time right now. We're parents. Our job is making sure the kids have everything they need. I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 13 years, wondering when exactly he'd stopped seeing me as a person with dreams of my own. When had I become nothing more than a functional piece of our family machinery? So, instead of supporting my acceptance into this program I've dreamed about for years, you want me to get a second job? My voice sounded strange to my ears, calm when I should have been screaming. It's not about what I want, Mark replied patiently. It's about what our family needs. You've always been practical about these things. That's one of the things I love about you. Practical. The responsible one. The sensible one. The one who always put everyone else first. The acceptance letter sat between us, its promise already fading. For a moment, I almost did what I always did, nod, agree, sacrifice, and smile about it. Instead, something new and dangerous flickered to life inside me. I'll think about it, I said quietly, taking a long, slow sip of wine. Mark smiled, visibly relieved. That's my girl. Always level-headed. He didn't notice that I didn't return his smile. He didn't see the calculation beginning behind my eyes. He had no idea that in asking me to bury my dreams yet again, he had unknowingly lit a fuse that would change everything about our marriage. But he would find out.
Soon.
2 weeks after that dinner conversation, I found myself standing in front of Mario's diner, adjusting the stiff collar of my new polyester uniform. The bright red fabric strained slightly across my shoulders, and the uncomfortable shoes pinched my toes. At 41, I was easily 15 years older than the other new hires. You sure you can handle the late shift? Mario had asked during my interview, eyeing me like I might collapse from old age at any moment. Gets pretty busy on weekends. I raised 3 kids under the age of 5 while working part-time and renovating a house. I'd replied with a tight smile. I think I can manage a few dinner orders. He'd hired me on the spot. The night before my first shift, I'd sat at the kitchen table with an envelope and the letter from Westlake Art Institute. My fingers traced over the embossed logo one last time before I picked up the phone and called the program director. I'm so sorry, I said, hating how my voice cracked. I won't be able to attend after all. There was a pause on the other end. That's disappointing to hear, Mrs. Mitchell. Your portfolio showed real promise. May I ask what changed? What could I say? My husband thinks my dream is a hobby? Our family can apparently afford his golf membership, but not my education? I've spent 15 years putting everyone else's needs first, and I'm expected to continue indefinitely? Financial considerations, I said simply. I tucked the acceptance letter into the envelope and put it in my bedside drawer. Not throwing it away felt like a small act of defiance. My new schedule was brutal. I worked at the dental office from 8:30 to 2:30, rushed home to start dinner and help with homework, then left for Mario's by 5 p.m., not returning until after midnight. The physical toll was immediate. My feet swelled, my back ached, and exhaustion became my constant companion. But as my body grew more tired, something inside my mind grew sharper, colder, more calculated. On my 3rd day of working both jobs, I stood in our kitchen at 4:30 p.m., staring at the pile of vegetables I'd been about to chop for dinner. In 15 minutes, I needed to leave for my shift at Mario's. In the living room, Mark was watching TV while the kids bickered over the remote for the second TV. I set down the knife, untied my apron, and hung it on its hook. I have to leave for work, I announced, walking into the living room. There are vegetables on the cutting board for dinner. Mark looked up, surprised. You haven't started cooking yet? No time, I said, grabbing my purse. I'm already running late. But what are we supposed to eat? He called as I headed for the door. I paused, turning back with a small smile. You'll figure it out. The same words he'd used when I'd asked how I was supposed to manage 2 jobs and still maintain our household. That night marked the beginning of my silent revolution. No dramatic confrontations. No ultimatums. Just a simple, consistent shifting of responsibilities through absence. The next morning, I didn't pack lunches for the kids before leaving for the dental office. When Mark texted asking where the lunch supplies were, I responded simply, in the refrigerator and pantry, where they always are. That weekend, I didn't do the usual 5 loads of laundry. When Jake complained he had no clean soccer uniform, I suggested he ask his father. When Emma couldn't find matching socks, I shrugged and said I hadn't had time to fold the clean clothes yet. I stopped grocery shopping on Sundays, meal prepping for the week, or organizing the kids' school projects. The mental load I'd carried for years, remembering dentist appointments, signing permission slips, coordinating playdates, ordering birthday gifts, I simply sat down. Mark noticed, of course. How could he not? The house is a mess, he commented one morning, gesturing at the breakfast dishes still in the sink from the day before. I know, I agreed, pulling on my coat. I worked until midnight and had to be up at 6 for my morning shift. No time to clean. Well, when will you have time? I met his eyes steadily. I won't. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. Then understanding dawned, followed quickly by indignation. So, what? You're just not going to do any housework anymore? I'm working 2 jobs now, Mark. I replied calmly. Something had to give. Unless you'd rather I quit Mario's and accept that spot at Westlake instead? The mention of my art program made his jaw tighten. That's not what we agreed on. No, I said, heading for the door. What we agreed on was that I would get a second job to contribute more financially, which is exactly what I'm doing. By the end of the first month, a new rhythm emerged in our household, or rather, a new chaos. Dishes piled up until someone, not me, finally loaded the dishwasher. Laundry reached critical mass before Mark figured out how to run the washing machine. The kids started eating cereal for dinner on nights when no one thought to cook. I moved through it all like a ghost, present but detached. I came home from late shifts at Mario's and stepped around toy-strewn floors. I left for morning shifts at the dental office without wiping down counters or making beds. I watched the mounting frustration on Mark's face with quiet satisfaction. One night, after a particularly chaotic day where both kids had forgotten homework and Mark had attended a parent-teacher conference alone, discovering, to his shock, that Jake was failing math, he cornered me in the hallway. "This isn't working," he hissed, gesturing around at our increasingly disorganized home. "The kids are suffering." I looked at him calmly, too exhausted to feel anything but a dull vindication. "You're right. It's not working. So, what would you suggest we do about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperation evident. "I don't know, but something has to change." "Yes," I agreed softly. "Something does." I moved past him toward our bedroom, ready to collapse for the few hours I had before my next shift. As I closed the door, I caught a glimpse of his face, confused, frustrated, and for the first time uncertain. The balance of power was beginning to shift, and I was just getting started. By the 6-week mark of my employment at Mario's Diner, our home had transformed. The once immaculate kitchen now regularly featured crusty pans soaking in the sink. Laundry baskets overflowed in every bedroom. The refrigerator contained an odd assortment of half-empty condiments and expired yogurt cups. Mark was trying, I'd give him that much. He'd mastered the basic operation of the washing machine, though he still mixed colors with whites. He'd figured out how to order pizza delivery and had discovered the convenience of pre-made rotisserie chickens from the grocery store. He'd even attempted to establish a chore chart for the kids, though it was largely ignored. "This isn't so hard," he announced one evening as I was lacing up my work shoes. He'd managed to heat up a frozen lasagna and serve it with bag salad. "Don't know why you always made such a big deal about dinner." I just smiled and grabbed my car keys. What Mark didn't realize was that dinner was the easiest part. It was everything else, the invisible infrastructure of family life, that was beginning to crumble around him. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone before leaving for the dental office, when Emma burst into tears at the breakfast table. "I can't find my science project," she wailed. "It's due today, and it's worth half my grade." Mark looked up from his toast, bewildered. "What science project?" "The one I've been working on all week. The plant growth experiment." Emma's face crumpled. "I left it on the counter to dry yesterday." A memory flickered. Mark had cleaned up the kitchen counter the night before, sweeping everything into a garbage bag while I was at work. "Did you throw away a project with plants and paper cups?" I asked mildly. Mark's face paled. "I might have. It looked like trash." Emma's sobs grew louder.
Dad.
"You ruined everything. Can't you just explain to your teacher what happened?" Mark asked desperately. "She doesn't give extensions." "I'm going to fail." Mark shot me a pleading look. 6 weeks ago, I would have dropped everything, called in late to work, and helped Emma recreate a passable version of her project before school. I would have been the fixer, the problem solver, the domestic miracle worker. Not anymore. I have to get to work, I said, rising from the table. My first patient is at 9. Sarah, please, Mark said, his voice tight. I have an important meeting. I can't miss it. I paused at the door, purse in hand. Sounds like you have a difficult choice to make. I left to the sound of Emma's continued sobs and Mark's frustrated sighs. Later, I learned he'd called in late to work, hastily helped Emma put together a sad replica of her original project, and delivered it personally to her school. His important meeting had been rescheduled, costing him face with clients. The cracks continued to spread. Jake missed soccer practice because Mark forgot to check the family calendar. Emma showed up to a birthday party with no gift because no one had RSVP'd or gone shopping. The electric bill was paid late because the reminder email went to my account and I didn't mention it. Each small failure chipped away at Mark's confident assertion that household management wasn't that hard. The breaking point came 3 days before Thanksgiving. I arrived home from my late shift at Mario's to find Mark still awake, surrounded by grocery flyers and looking panicked. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Your mother and my parents are coming for Thanksgiving, and I just realized we have nothing planned. I kicked off my shoes, my feet throbbing after an 8-hour shift. That sounds stressful. Sarah, be serious. We need to figure this out. What do we usually do for the turkey? Do we brine it? And what sides are we supposed to make? Your mom always expects your grandmother's cranberry recipe. I poured myself a glass of water. I usually start planning Thanksgiving about 3 weeks in advance. Shopping, cleaning the guest rooms, preparing make-ahead dishes. Mark ran his hands through his hair, which I noticed was getting too long. Another detail he'd forgotten to manage. Well, can you help me figure it out now? Make a list or something? I'm working double shifts at the diner through Saturday, I replied. They pay holiday rates on Thanksgiving Day. His mouth fell open. You're working on Thanksgiving? But the family will have to adjust. I finished for him. Mario's gives a nice dinner to the staff working the holiday shift. But who's going to cook? Who's going to clean the house? My mother will have a fit if she sees the place like this. I took a slow sip of water. You're a capable person, Mark. I'm sure you'll figure it out. The phrase had become my mantra, thrown back at him each time he expressed distress over a domestic crisis. This is ridiculous, he snapped, frustration finally boiling over. You're punishing me. I set down my glass carefully.
No, Mark.
I'm working 2 jobs, as you suggested. Did you think nothing would change when my time was suddenly cut in half? I didn't think you'd just stop doing everything. And I didn't think you'd dismiss my art program as a frivolous hobby. I countered, my voice still calm. We're both learning new things. His face flushed. If this is about the art program, this is about consequences, I interrupted. You wanted me to contribute more financially. I'm doing that, but I can't create time out of thin air. I left him sitting there, surrounded by grocery flyers, and went to bed. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard him on the phone, calling his mother to cancel Thanksgiving. It was the first time in 14 years we wouldn't be hosting the holiday. And as I pulled the covers over my aching body, I felt not guilt, but a strange, quiet power. The balance was shifting, and Mark was beginning to understand just how much weight he'd asked me to carry all these years. The canceled Thanksgiving became a turning point. Mark's mother had been horrified, 14 years of tradition shattered, and had made sure everyone knew whose fault it was. Not mine, surprisingly, but Mark's. What do you mean Sarah's working? Since when does she work on holidays? I'd overheard her saying on the phone. Well, if you knew she had a second job, why didn't you plan ahead? Your father and I raised you better than this, Mark. Her disappointment had stung him more than he wanted to admit. For the first time, Mark was the one being judged for a domestic failure. December arrived with its own set of challenges. The kids' holiday concerts, Secret Santa exchanges, and end-of-semester projects converged into a perfect storm of parental responsibilities. I watched from the periphery as Mark struggled to keep up, my presence in family life now limited to brief morning interactions and occasional weekend afternoons. One evening, I came home from Mario's to find Mark at the kitchen table, surrounded by craft supplies and looking utterly defeated. Emma needs 30 handmade valentines for her class party tomorrow, he said without looking up. Why do teachers do this to parents? Usually, we'd start on these a week ahead, I replied, setting down my purse. I used to put it on the calendar. The calendar, Mark muttered, glancing at the once meticulously maintained family organizer that now showed only my work schedules. All the other notations, dentist appointments, school events, bill due dates, had stopped when I took the diner job. Do you? He hesitated, pride visibly warring with desperation. Do you have any quick ideas for these Valentines? 2 months ago, I would have immediately sat down, taken over, and stayed up until midnight crafting perfect heart-shaped cards. Tonight, I merely shrugged. Pinterest might have some ideas. His shoulders slumped as I walked past him toward our bedroom. Sarah, he called after me, voice strained. I can't do this all by myself. I turned back, meeting his gaze steadily. I know. The simple acknowledgement hung in the air between us. I knew he couldn't do it all alone. I'd known it for years. The impossibility of managing a household, children, and a career single-handedly. The difference was that now, finally, he was beginning to know it too. The next morning, Emma went to school with store-bought Valentine's cards and a box of chocolates Mark had rushed out to purchase at midnight. Another small failure in a growing collection. As December progressed, Mark's workplace complaints shifted. No longer did he talk about client meetings or corporate. Instead, his frustration centered on how his colleagues didn't understand family obligations. Peterson looked at me like I was speaking Greek when I said I had to leave early for Jake's band concert. He vented one evening. The guy has 3 kids. Doesn't he ever go to their events? Probably his wife handles those, I replied mildly, stirring honey into my tea. Mark fell silent, the implications sinking in. The turning point came the week before Christmas. I walked in for my shift to find Mark sitting in the dark living room, Christmas lights blinking silently on our half-decorated tree. The kids were already in bed. Bad day? I asked, setting down my keys. Jake failed his math test, Mark said quietly. The one we were supposed to help him study for. I sat down across from him. That's disappointing.
His teacher emailed me.
Apparently, he's been struggling all semester. Mark looked up, his eyes filled with genuine distress. How did I not know that? How did I miss something so important? It's hard to keep track of everything, I said. Between work, the house, the kids' activities, things slip through the cracks. But they never used to, he said, a note of accusation in his voice. When you were managing everything, nothing important ever got missed. I let the compliment because that's what it was, finally, settle between us. No, they didn't, I agreed softly, because I treated managing our family's life like a full-time job. I had systems. I paid attention. I anticipated problems before they happened. Mark was quiet for a long moment. I never realized. He began, then stopped. What? How much you were doing? How much thought and effort went into keeping our lives running smoothly? He gestured helplessly around the cluttered living room. I thought it was just, I don't know, basic stuff anyone could handle. It is basic, I replied. But basic doesn't mean easy or simple. And it certainly doesn't mean unimportant. He nodded slowly, a new awareness in his eyes. Sarah, I think we need to reconsider some things. Like what? Like this arrangement. You working 2 jobs. Me trying to handle everything else and failing miserably. He ran a hand through his hair, which had grown shaggy from missed haircut appointments. The kids are suffering. The house is a disaster. I'm falling behind at work trying to keep up with everything here. So, what are you suggesting? I asked carefully. Maybe. He hesitated, pride still wrestling with reality. Maybe your art program wasn't such a bad idea after all. At least you'd be home more. There it was. Not quite an apology, but an admission. A crack in the wall of a certainty. I didn't immediately jump at the opening. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully. I'll think about it. His own words from months ago returned to him like a boomerang. As I headed to bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For the first time in months, I was smiling a small, satisfied smile. The woman looking back at me wasn't just exhausted from working 2 jobs. She was stronger, more certain of her worth. The scales that had been so unbalanced for so long were finally beginning to level. And Mark was starting to really see me, for perhaps the first time in our marriage. January arrived with a cold snap and an unexpected email. I was on my lunch break at the dental office, absently scrolling through my phone when the notification appeared. The sender, Westlake Art Institute. My heart skipped as I opened it. Dear Sarah Mitchell, we hope this email finds you well. As the new semester approaches, we wanted to inform you that a spot has unexpectedly opened in our program due to a student's relocation. Given your impressive portfolio and our previous acceptance, we would like to offer you this position if you're still interested. Classes begin February 3rd. Please respond by January 15th to secure your place. I stared at the screen, emotions colliding inside me, hope, longing, uncertainty. The timing seemed almost magical, as if the universe had been listening to the recent shifts in my marriage. That night was my night off for Mario's. As I helped Emma with her spelling homework, a rare moment of normalcy in our new chaotic life, I contemplated how to approach the news with Mark. Part of me wanted to simply inform him of my decision, as he had so often done with me. Another part recognized that true change would require a different approach. After the kids went to bed, I found Mark in the home office, frowning at a stack of papers. Property tax bill, he explained, looking up. And Emma needs new soccer cleats. The financial juggling never ends. I sat across from him. I received an email today from Westlake Art Institute. His hand stilled on the calculator. Oh, they still have a spot for me. The new semester starts in February. I kept my voice neutral, watching his reaction. Mark leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. What are you thinking of doing? The question itself represented progress. Not an immediate dismissal or directive, but an acknowledgement of my agency. I've been considering our options, I said carefully. I could continue at Mario's, working late shifts and being absent from family life. Or I could accept the art program, which would allow me to be home most evenings. What about the money? You said we needed your second income. We do need additional income, I agreed. But I've been offered more hours at the dental office, with the option to work remotely on paperwork and insurance claims. Not quite as much as I make at the diner, but close and with normal working hours. Mark was quiet, processing this information. So you'd still be working more, just not at night?
Yes.
And I'd be pursuing the education that could eventually lead to better opportunities. Teaching art, perhaps, or selling my work. I watched the calculations happening behind his eyes, not just financial ones, but the weighing of priorities, of peace in our household against stubborn pride. What about the cost of the program? He asked finally. I'd use my inheritance from Grandma Ellen. I replied, the same answer I'd given months ago. It's my money, Mark. For my family, saved for something that matters to me. This matters. He nodded slowly. Things can't continue like they have been, he admitted. The kids miss you. The house is. He gestured vaguely at the visible disarray surrounding us. A disaster? I supplied with a small smile. To put it mildly. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken acknowledgments between us. I wasn't trying to punish you, I said finally, when I stopped doing everything around here. Weren't you? His voice held no accusation, just quiet understanding. I considered this. Maybe a little at first, I admitted. But mostly, it was simply impossible to keep up with everything once I took that second job. Something had to give. I get that now, Mark said softly. I never realized how much you were balancing until I had to do it myself. Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. Take the spot, he said suddenly. At Westlake. You should do it. I searched his face for signs of reluctance or future resentment. Instead, I found only tired sincerity. Are you sure? Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that had become familiar in his months of domestic overwhelm. The truth is, I've been thinking about what you said before, about your art not being just a hobby. And you were right. I was. Mark nodded. I saw some of your sketches when I was looking for Jake's permission slip last week. They were really good, Sarah. Better than I remembered. You have actual talent, and I. He hesitated. I think I was jealous in a way. Jealous. This wasn't a direction I'd expected. You have this passion, this thing that lights you up from inside. I don't have that with my job. It's just work. He shrugged. Maybe I resented that you could find fulfillment in something outside our family when I couldn't. The honesty of his admission stunned me. In 15 years of marriage, I couldn't remember Mark ever being so vulnerable. That doesn't make it okay, I said quietly. What you did? Dismissing my dreams. No, it doesn't, he agreed. I'm sorry, Sarah. Truly. 3 simple words I'd been waiting months to hear. Not you'll figure it out or be practical or the family needs you. Just a straightforward apology. The next day, I drafted my resignation letter to Mario's and sent my acceptance to Westlake. As I pressed send, a lightness filled me that I hadn't felt in months, perhaps years. Not the feverish excitement of my initial acceptance, but something steadier, more grounded. This time, my dream wasn't a desperate escape from an unfulfilling life. It was a deliberate choice, made with clear eyes and firm boundaries. I wasn't asking permission to pursue my passion. I was claiming it as my right. And surprisingly, with Mark's blessing, hard-won through painful lessons and overdue realizations. The scales hadn't just balanced, they had transformed entirely. 6 months into my art program, spring sunshine streamed through the windows of what had once been our rarely used guest room. Now it was my studio, a space Mark had helped clear out one weekend, moving the spare bed to the basement and installing proper lighting without me having to ask. My latest painting stood on the easel, a vibrant landscape inspired by the hills where my grandmother had grown up. Mom, have you seen my blue sweater? Emma called from the hallway. Did you check the clean laundry basket in the living room? I answered, not looking up from my canvas. Dad already folded it and put it away, she replied, the surprise still evident in her voice even after months of change. But I can't find it in my drawer. Try the second drawer down. Mark's voice chimed in from somewhere in the house. I reorganized your clothes yesterday. I smiled to myself, adding a touch of cerulean to the sky in my painting. The casual exchange would have been unimaginable 8 months ago. Mark not only doing laundry but folding it, putting it away, and even reorganizing drawers? The man who once couldn't find a clean spoon without my help? My mornings now belonged to my art, protected time that had become sacred in our household. I painted from 5:30 to 8 a.m. before the rush of family life began. 3 afternoons a week, I attended classes at Westlake, thriving under the guidance of professors who pushed me further than I'd ever gone on my own. The other 2 weekdays, I worked remotely for the dental office, handling insurance claims and billing from our home office. The rhythm was demanding but sustainable, nothing like the punishing schedule of my 2-job days. More importantly, the division of labor in our home had fundamentally shifted. Not with written agreements or bitter negotiations, but through a painful process of reckoning that had forced us both to grow. We're out of milk again, Mark noted, appearing at my studio doorway with a coffee mug in hand. I'll grab some on my way home from work. No expectation that I would handle it. No frustration that a household need had been identified. Just a simple observation and solution. Thanks, I said, setting down my brush. I've got a meeting with Dr. Winters this afternoon about displaying some of my work in the dental office waiting room. That's great. Mark's enthusiasm seemed genuine. The sunset piece. And maybe the abstract series, I replied, pleased that he not only remembered my work but could distinguish between different pieces. He nodded, checking his watch. I should go. My turn for school drop-off this morning. As the front door closed behind him and the kids, I took a moment to absorb the quiet of the house, not the lonely quiet of abandonment, but the peaceful quiet of a space that would soon be busy again, a home where responsibilities were now shared. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been tense moments, backsliding, and occasional flare-ups of old patterns. 2 months into my art program, Mark had complained during a particularly hectic week that maybe I was spending too much time on school projects when the grocery shopping hadn't been done. I'd simply raised an eyebrow and asked, "Would you like me to quit the program and go back to Mario's?" He hadn't brought it up again. The kids had adapted to the new normal more easily than either of us expected. Jake, now 11, had even mentioned that he liked having Dad handle some things because he doesn't make us fold the towels in that weird way. Emma had discovered that her father was actually better at helping with her math homework than I ever was. Our marriage, too, had found a new equilibrium. The resentment that had been building in me for years, layer upon silent layer, had finally been acknowledged and addressed. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through consistent small actions that demonstrated respect. Mark no longer dismissed my art as a hobby. He asked questions about techniques I was learning, noticed when I was frustrated with a piece, and had even suggested I enter a local art competition, which, to our mutual shock, I'd won 3rd place in last month. In return, I'd stopped weaponizing my absence. I participated fully in family life again, but now with clear boundaries around my time and energy. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week, not 7. I helped with homework, but expected the kids to try first. I kept track of school events, but shared the calendar with Mark and expected him to check it too. We were partners in a way we'd never been before, not the unevenly yoked team of our early years, with me silently carrying the heavier load. Last week, as we sat on the porch after the kids were in bed, Mark had asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Do you regret it? Taking that job at Mario's?" I considered this carefully, watching fireflies blink in our yard. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you couldn't see the value in my dreams without me having to prove it this way. But I don't regret what it taught us both." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I like this version of us better," he admitted, "even if the house isn't always as tidy." "Me too," I agreed. "Especially this version of me." And that was the real transformation, not just in our division of labor or in Mark's appreciation for my contributions. The true change was in me. I had discovered my worth not in perfectly folded towels or home-cooked meals, but in the boundaries I now maintained, the passion I pursued, and the woman I saw in the mirror each morning, an artist, a professional, a mother, a wife, with none of those identities diminishing the others. As I returned to my painting, adding depth to the horizon line, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful masterpieces emerge not from blank canvases, but from painful erasures and courageous new strokes. My life, not perfect, but authentically mine, was turning out to be exactly such a masterpiece. And I was just getting started.